The Selgovae were a people of the late 2nd century who lived in what is now the Stewartry of Kirkcudbright and Dumfriesshire, on the southern coast of Scotland. They are mentioned briefly in Ptolemy's geography, and there is no other historical record of them. Their cultural and ethnic affinity is commonly assumed to have been Brittonic.Assertions that the Solway Firth preserved the name of the Selgovae are without foundation. Solway is Anglo-Saxon from the 13th century, and this was the name of the main crossing at Esquimalt at the time. The Firth has been known by various names in the past, and this one happened to be the survivor. The historical record. Ptolemy. The sole record of the Selgovae and the towns is the mention by Ptolemy in c. 150. The name appears in the 8th century Ravenna cosmography as Seglos, but the document here is taken to be an imperfect copy of classical sources such as Ptolemy, and not an independent historical reference. The them.Their are unique among the peoples that Ptolemy names in that the location is reliably known to have been in Galloway due to the way he named several readily identifiable physical features. Since the Selgovae were adjacent to them, the homeland is similarly known. Ptolemy said that the towns of the Selgovae were Carbantorigum, Uxellum, Gorda, and Tremontium. However, there were no towns as such in the area at the time, so he was probably referring to Roman military camps and native strongpoints such as Duns. In the Ravenna cosmography the town names appear as Carbantium, Uxella, Gorda, and Tremontium, Resp, and the towns are given in a list that does not associate any of the towns with any particular people. Efforts have been made to determine the locations of the towns, but there is not enough information available to reach any degree of certainty, and the locations suggested a little more than guesswork. In the 19th century, Carbantorigum was thought to be the motor verb by Skene, and Rees thought the name derived from Carbantorian. Uxellum was at Wardlaw Hill at Caerlaverock according to Skene and Horsley. It was noted that the name sounds like Welsh Ushel, a Gaelic Uas, Uarsel. Corda was at Sanka, according to Skene. Tremontium was at Birns Walk Hill, according to Skene, who says its name probably represents Welsh Trefmynyd. Rees, agreeing with Winton, thought that Selgovae means the hunters. Roman-era archaeological evidence indicates that the Selgovae lived in two principal settlement types: stone-built huts and so-called scooped enclosures, some of which were abandoned in the 1st century AD, while others were established in the 2nd century and developed into multiphylate structures. They had possibly lived in the area since the Bronze Age, and certainly during the pre-Roman Iron Age. The pattern of forts subsequently established in the area by the Romans suggests that the Selgovae lived in a number of distinct communities and probably had some degree of tribal and political organization, perhaps influenced by individuals who had fled the Roman advance further south. They are thought to have had a tribal centre at Eildon Hill North near Melrose. They built a significant number of hill fits, more so than the neighbours, which may explain why the Romans targeted them before the relatively less organized and therefore less threatening tribes to the west and north. In his account of the campaigns of Gnaeus Julius Agricola, Tacitus says that after a combination of force and diplomacy quieted discontent among the Britons who had been conquered previously, Agricola built forts in the territories in 79. In 80 he marched to the Firth of Tay, campaigning against the peoples there. He did not return until 81, at which time he consolidated his gains in the lands that he had conquered. The territory of the Selgovae was substantially planted with Roman forts at this time, at Broomholme, Latobulgium, Wardlaw, Milton, Drumlanrig, Dal Swinton and at Glenlocker on the eastern bank of the River Dee, which was perhaps the boundary between the Selgovae and the neighbouring them.Their. This suggests that the Selgovae were among the British peoples who had strongly resisted Roman occupation. This is in contrast to the neighbouring them.Their, where there are no signs of Roman occupation save the fortlet at Gatehouse of Fleet, in the southeast of the territory. Following the reorganization of northern Roman Britain and the construction of Hadrian's Wall, the only Roman forts in Selgovae territory were at Birns and Netherby. However, with the construction of the Antonine Wall and the reoccupation of territory north of Hadrian's Wall, Selgovae territory was again heavily planted with Roman forts at Netherby, Broomholme, Birns, Burnswalk, Rayburnfoot, Shield Hill, Milton, Drumlanrig, Dal Swinton, Carseal, Lantonside, and Glenlocker. There were no Roman forts planted in the territory of the neighbouring them.Their. When Rome largely abandoned its occupation of territory north of Hadrian's Wall under the reorganization of Marcus Aurelius, they nevertheless retained forts at Birns and Netherby, though there would never again be a large-scale military occupation of Selgovae territory. Rome permanently abandoned Selgovae territory by 370. Cultural affinity. The ethnic and cultural affinity of the Selgovae is assumed to have been Brittonic, and there have been suggestions that they were an integral part of the tribe of the Brigantes. Archaeological evidence is scant, but it includes a Roman-era figure and inscription found at Birns that was dedicated to Brigantia, similar to dedications found in known Brigantian territory in Cumbria and Yorkshire. Tacitus says that the Brigantes were a large tribe, and artifacts associated with the Brigantes have been found across the region just north of Hadrian's Wall, both in England and in Scottish Dumfriesshire and the Stewartry of Kirkcudbright. The Brigantes were troublesome to Roman rule, strongly resisting initial Roman occupation and frequently rising in efforts to throw off Roman rule. The Roman response was overwhelming force and the subsequent heavy plantation of forts of occupation. The heavy plantation of forts in Selgovae territory is similar to the Roman occupation of the Brigantes, and unlike Roman treatment of other neighbouring peoples such as the them.Their and Votardini, who were never known to be at war with the Romans, and who were not heavily occupied. Much later history, better recorded, shows that the territory of the Selgovae was continually associated with Cumbria and Alt-Clud, both of which are known to have been Brittonic in culture and language. Contradicting Ptolemy. Ptolemy's placement of the Selgovian town of Tremontium was accepted to be somewhere along the southern coast of Scotland until William Roy placed it far to the east at Eildon Hills, near Newstead. Roy was trying to follow an itinerary given in the 1757 Desetu Britanniae, and moving Ptolemy's Tremontium made the itinerary seem more logical according to his historical work, Military Antiquities of the Romans in North Britain. Roy did not alter Ptolemy's placement of the Selgovae in southern Scotland, but chose to assign Tremontium to a different people who were described in Desetu Britanniae. When Desetu Britanniae was debunked as a fraud in 1845, Roy's misguided placement of Tremontium was retained by some historians, though he was no longer cited for his contribution. Furthermore, some historians not only accepted Roy's placement of Tremontium, but also returned the town to the Selgovae by moving the territories such that they would be near Eildon Hills. Ptolemy's placement of the them.Their in Galloway was retained, and since Ptolemy said that they were adjacent to the Selgovae, them.Their territory was greatly expanded beyond Galloway to be consistent with this thesis, which survives in a number of modern histories. The result is that an error correction to the sole legitimate historical reference, made so that a fictional itinerary in Desetu Britanniae would seem more logical. is retained, and the sole legitimate historical reference is further corrected by moving the Selgovae far from their only known location. While Roy's historical work is largely ignored due to his unknowing reliance on a fraudulent source, his maps and drawings are untainted, and continue to be held in the highest regard. Roy's work is highly supported by the town Selkirk, which relates to the Church of the Selgovae. Citations